Good evening, and welcome to News Break. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi. You know, Mississippi, where I say the air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. It's the garden spot, and it's full of trouble. And so we're here broadcasting daily to try to keep you informed. And many of you are living outside the state of Mississippi, but you want to know what's going on in your hometown. So that's our goal, is to keep you informed in hopes that one day soon you'll migrate back to Mississippi, where your talents are so much needed. And so today, my co-host, Chris Winters, and I are going to be talking about a few things that are plaguing this city at the moment. Chris, let me turn to you, and good seeing you again.
Good to see you too, Mr. Garrett. The glass is half full. We're just keeping at it, one day at a time.
One day at a time. I used to say, I get my tack hammer and my chisel, and I go to the mountain.
There you go.
Every day.
Every day.
And people driving by looking at me with that tack hammer and that chisel on that mountain.
Yeah.
And I know they wonder, has he lost his mind?
Yeah.
But the Bible said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed,
Yeah.
that you can make mountains move.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what the Bible said, Chris.
Yeah, and all kinds of people taking weekends off. We don't know anything about that.
Right, that's so true. So here in Jackson, we clearly need faith.
Yes, sir.
Our city has a poverty rate of greater than 42% of its African American citizens, which constitutes 85% of the overall population of Jackson and 40+% of the overall population of the state of Mississippi. Many people might not know that, but at one point in time, there were more African Americans in Mississippi than there were whites. And of course, that was because of the slave trade and the things that were going on back in that time. And so what you have, the remnants of that, is that you still have a great number of African Americans who call Mississippi home. But Chris, they are in trouble.
How do you call? I mean, if you're in a position of leadership in this state, in Hinds County, in Jackson, Mississippi, how do you feel good? How can I mean, what are you presiding over when you have such a high percentage of your population that lives in poverty? What are you doing about that? What tools are you adding to the toolbox to try to intervene and help your people?
Well, the first tool that you ought to have, and the one that you ought to use every day, is the tool of economic empowerment. Whenever there's an opportunity to make certain that folk that reside in your community can go to work, that is the first tool that you ought to utilize, and you ought to utilize it to its fullest, because there is a link between poverty and everything that's wrong in our city.
Sure, and you know, it wasn't just a week or so ago, I believe the governor was touting the low unemployment rate in Mississippi, and I thought, my gosh, all you got to do is draw the drapes and take a look outside and drive these streets, and you see that you know, 4%, 4.1 maybe, or 4.3% unemployment. It just doesn't add up with what my ears hear and what my eyes see.
Well, that's because people have lost hope, and so they're no longer counted. They're no longer counted in the census report, quite frankly. And they're no longer counted there when you're talking about unemployment. And so Mississippi may have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation, but it has the highest crime in the nation. So you have to look at those two things and ask yourself, how do I reconcile this?
Yeah, it just doesn't add up. I don't know how this goes on, but if we don't create, we talked a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, about Continental Tire coming into Clinton, and what is going to be the next economic engine for this area, where we can give people a chance to have pride and dignity that comes along with a job that's making a living wage, where people can actually have benefit, where they can support their family, where they can bring the kids to the doctor, where they can go themselves to the doctor every so often, or the dentist, or whatever. What's the next economic engine going to be?
Well, and I don't see Continental Tire as an economic engine when it comes to African Americans,
Right.
Chris.
More broad.
Yeah, it's on a broader base. You know, it had a tremendous impact on the state of Mississippi. So, like Nissan did, and all of those things are good. But Chris, you got to have specific programs that target the underserved, and that target the population that has been historically denied. Too often, companies like Continental Tire Company come into Mississippi and take on the attitude and the policies and procedures of the governing body that brought them here. And I guess you can understand that if they're giving you all kind of largesse to get you to come here, waiving the taxes that you have to pay for 5 or 10 years, spending money for economic development and putting in all your infrastructure and things of that nature, which Hinds County did for Continental Tire. And yet Hinds County didn't have not one say-so about who got contracts for goods and services.
And now look at what Jackson City Council is doing with this trash contract. There's more out in the local media outlets this morning about the exorbitant legal fees. Now here you do have an opportunity for an economic engine that has going to have significant bearing on the African American community in Jackson, and you have predominantly African American city council ends up voting it down, and now they're fighting back and forth in the courts. It seems to be no end to it. They have spent so far $138,000, according to the city council president, $138,000 out of an $830,000 annual legal budget. Wow. To spend on the fighting back and forth in court, because here came this African American contractor from New Orleans and Baton Rouge, easily able to provide services to our city, and do so at a rate of $1.2 million a year cheaper, and the Black Council says no.
How can that be? How can, we said the most important tool was economic development, in terms of how you make the opportunities go in your community,
Right.
and sustain the community.
Right.
How can it be that an African American majority council votes against an African American firm?
Yeah, it just defies logic. They must be focused on other things, and not this community. And the other thing too, imagine if that company is the company that's providing the work right now and has been since April 1st. Imagine the impact that will have, kind of an anchor, and other things can be born out of that when people see that that's going along just fine, like it is now. They had some speed bumps when they first started out, but they're just doing fine now. Imagine the momentum that could be built, and people start getting excited, and we're having more and more opportunities.
Yeah, because it's an economic engine. And so I had the opportunity to take Mr. Stanton of Stanton's Body Shop over to meet Mr. Richards, and let Mr. Richards know that all body work that occurs that he needs, that he ought to look at Stanton as a provider. And I'm certain that his quality and his price will meet his standards. And we took Robert Hickenbottom over to meet Mr. Richards to say he's a provider of tires, Blackstone Tire Company, and he can provide you tires of any magnitude. I took Garrett Enterprises over there to meet with Mr. Richards to say that we're here to support you, that if you're running short in truck drivers, in trucks, if you need us to help you in any way. And he immediately asked us to put out all of his dumpsters for him. And so we sent a crew around and picked up those dumpsters and placed them in the designated areas. And so we're tying into Mr. Richards, and he's tying back into us.
Support. And and keeping those dollars right here in our city instead of outside.
35 years, and I've been in business 40 years. I've never gotten a call from Waste Management a day in my life to do one thing, not one thing. And we've been here for 40 years, since 1980, and I've not heard from Waste Management.
Yeah.
They've had the contract for over 35 years.
Correct.
And I don't see their footprint in the community in any way.
It's an international conglomerate. I mean, I saw an earnings report from Waste Management on one of the financial papers or channels, one or the other. But when you have quarterly revenues of $4.5 billion, no, that's not gonna, that footprint is in a bank somewhere. That footprint is not in Jackson.
It's not in Jackson, Mississippi.
No.
And Chris, bring me up to date on the payment of Mr. Richards' bill.
It's still being it was voted down, and the matter is still in the courts. The city council voted the matter down. Was it? Yeah, the alarming thing about that too was it was a 5-2 vote to vote that down, which means that one person, I believe this is the council president, Virgie Lindsay, must have got nervous with all this legal stuff going on, and, well, we're not going to pay them. But lo and behold, their filings, the city council's attorney filings, indicated that while this is all working its way out in court, we will continue with the status quo. So you're going to allow the continuing status quo. Richards Disposal continues day in, day out, successfully picking up the trash around Jackson, but you're not going to pay them to do that.
And Chris, I heard some analogies that I just can't get out of my system. Kenny Stokes, a long-term council person, probably the longest-serving African-American council person in the whole state, probably, that made the analogy that if a little boy comes over with a lawnmower and cuts your grass, but you didn't ask him to cut your grass, then you don't owe him anything. And I thought about that. I said, now, this is a long ways from a little boy with a lawnmower. But even in that analogy, I would think that you would be a big enough human being, a big enough individual, and especially in an African-American city, to tell the little boy, even though I didn't ask you to cut my grass, I'm going to pay you because you did a good job.
A good heart, a good spirit.
A good heart and a good spirit.
Right.
Is that what we're missing?
We must be. These council members, especially a group of them, a certain group, seem to be missing that completely. You know, I think it leaves a reasonable-minded person questioning, why are you doing this? What can be the motives? Because it's what's going on right now is just not helping the city.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Chris, we're getting ready to go to a station break, but I want our viewers out there to know that we're broadcasting live from here in Jackson, Mississippi, and you can see us on Facebook, on YouTube, on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, and on Roku TV. We're being seen in over 139 countries and all over the world. So those of you in New York City, African Americans in New Jersey, that have a little bit better understanding of how the economics ought to work in an African American city, would you please share with our leadership here the kinds of things that they ought to be doing to make a real difference in our community? Part of the problem with our leadership is they don't know. And the other part is their heart's not in the right place. And so we're getting ready to go to station break, and we're going to be right back after this message.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.grade rock materials. recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. By using Socrates Garrett ENT.com's crushed concrete products, anyone from homeowners to general contractors can help reduce landfilled concrete waste, conserve natural resources, and gain significant economic savings on materials and disposal costs. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com. SGECOVIDSolutions.com is paving the way forward for a safer city government delivering cutting-edge biosecurity and biosafety protocols developed internationally by top virologists and scientists using an all-natural cleaning solution, killing COVID-19 on contact like no other product on the international market. For more information, please call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at SGECOVIDSolutions.com. Let SGECOVIDSolutions.com provide innovative rapid facilities testing and world-class state-of-the-art biorisk safety protocols for all of your coronavirus needs. Call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at sgecovidsolutions.com.
We're back, Chris. And, you know, it's good to be broadcasting live from here in Jackson, Mississippi. And those of us at Socrates Garrett Enterprises want to thank our many customers that have called us because they need an aggregate, they need crushed concrete, they need their driveways put in, they need old homes demolished. And we are a statewide contractor, having worked all over the state, but more importantly, we worked all over the world, from Puerto Rico to the Virgin Islands, all the way up into Minot, North Dakota in November. And you know how cold it is in Minot in November. So we're an excellent firm. We need your support. We're currently getting a lot of kickback and pushback from the African-American leadership at the council level and at the Board of Supervisors level. And that's because they want to silence us. But you know, I just can't be silent because, it's just not in my DNA. If it's not benefiting the most of us, then it doesn't have any benefit at all. And so we're going to have to come together as a people. We're going to have to band together like other ethnic groups band together. And we're going to have to work this thing out. We're going to have to say that in an African-American dominated city, that an African-American firm will get every opportunity to have a contract and will actually have a preference, like the state of Louisiana, where there's a 10% preference for Louisiana-based businesses. Now, why don't we hear our council people talking about preferences for our African-American-owned firms? Why don't we hear them screaming and yelling, even at the state level, about the lack of opportunity in the African-American community? Part of that reason is because we are jealous and envious. And we think that if one gets ahead, it'll somehow reflect negatively on the rest of us. The old crabs in the barrel syndrome that's alive and well in the African-American community. We're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it every day. We're going to deal with it every day from now on until we make a difference in this community. Because I believe Jackson, Mississippi could be the Mecca of the South. I believe this should be the place where African-American firms are trying to relocate to Jackson, Mississippi as fast as they can. Not because we have a great economy, but we have a friendly government. I watched the Godfather movie on more than one occasion. And when he was moving to Cuba, he said there's nothing more important to a businessman than a friendly government. And you see, what we have in Jackson is an unfriendly government. An unfriendly government from African-American leadership is worse than a racist government who traditionally has denied opportunities to black folk. So we're going to continue to sound in the horn. We're going to talk about it every day, and we're going to talk about the bad policies that are being made. You see, the situation that we're in was created because of bad policy. It just didn't happen in a vacuum. It was created by bad policy, and it started with J. Edgar Hoover after the riots, the Watch riots, when they have policies that says that the African-American male cannot be in the home if an African-American female is to receive any benefit. And today in Section 8 housing, if there is a male in that house, she will be evicted. So the bad policy was designed to take the black male out of the house, destroy the family, and break the group. And it's been very, very effective. But what's disheartening more than ever is when those policies are perpetrated by African Americans. Again, we have 5 African American council people here. When they vote to deny an opportunity to a black business with a $1.2 million annual savings to a city that's broke, then it's something rotten. Not Denmark, but Jackson. And we got to get to the bottom of it. And we got to afford opportunity to all of our citizens. 40+% of Mississippi is black. Diversity is our strength. When will we recognize that we should have the best tourism market in the world because of our history and because of our diversity? Everything was born here, including Elvis Presley. Everything. Sam Cooke, the greatest orators of all times. When I was in Los Angeles in 1969, Thomas Bradley was the mayor of Los Angeles. I was on my way to Vietnam, but we had an African-American mayor in the city of Los Angeles. You have no idea what that meant to me. To see an African-American in that position at 21 years of age meant that I needed to hurry up and serve my country, do my time, and come back and assume the leadership roles that I've been prepared to do. But I didn't anticipate the friendly fire. Mm. I didn't anticipate that black folk would vote against you. Mm. Finally, and I'm going to turn over to Chris, we got a 7-member council. Now, 5 African Americans are on that council and 2 whites. Now, you got to explain to me how a white female can become president of the council in that configuration. That should tell you something right there. How can a white female rise to a position of president in a majority black council? Because you don't like yourself. You hate yourself. And you hate everybody else that's trying to do something. And we're just going to have to put you on the couch. And Chris, I know you spent a lot of time in dealing with therapy and mental illness, because I think we got some mental illness going on. What's your thought?
Well, a lot of thoughts. And, and that happened, is she just starting her 2nd term on the council? There's others been there longer than that. So, I don't understand how she was elevated to that position. Maybe if some of it was apathy, maybe thinking that the president's role is more work involved or something like that. I don't know the answer to it. But I did key in when you mentioned the policies, because, it was just 2 months ago, I was speaking to the head of the Mississippi Black Contractors Association. And she told me something that I never in a million years knew, that Cook County, Illinois, Chicago now, you don't come to City Hall with a response to a bid that doesn't include African American participation. Now, I'm not positive at what level, at what degree, but you're just turned away immediately because that's a heavy concentration of African American people, citizens in that area, and they've had an ordinance in place for over 30 years. So when you say policies, I ask myself, is there an ordinance at the local level in Jackson that shows a preference or a set aside or however words we want to use And I think the answer to the question is no. There is no policy. And we know that less than 5% of goods and services at the local level go to black contractors in a predominantly black city, and those awards are done by a predominantly black city council.
It's hard to fathom how that can be.
Yeah.
And it gets even worse. The president of our city council, the white female, voted for the award for richest disposal services and then voted against the payment of his invoice.
Payment, right.
That's some form of entrapment.
Right.
What kind of message is that?
Well, yeah, I don't understand it. It's again, we say baffling and hard to understand. We come up, how do you describe that? 1 minute it's okay and you're in favor of this contract, and the next minute, because there's legal matters going on, you're going to withhold payment from someone. I wonder if she's a business owner.
Well, I don't think it was legal matters. I think her constituency
Oh, okay.
made the phone call and told her,
Back off.
back off.
Yeah.
And I think she backed off. Because I think they play hardball over there, Chris. When 70% of our 1% sales tax money goes into one ward, and our council doesn't say a mumbling word about it. They don't take a stand about it. But yet they can take a stand on the denial of a contract to an African American.
Right.
How can that be?
Yeah.
And Chris, tell us a little bit about this ordinance that Councilman Banks brought up in terms of fighting crime with parents being held responsible.
Well, it was an ordinance that he indicated that he wrote that would have incremental progressive punishment for parents whose children commit gun crimes in Jackson. So it started out, I believe, with 24 hours in jail for the parent. If you have a child that commits a gun crime, I assume that's being found guilty of a gun crime, then the parent or parents, whatever, would have a mandatory 24 hours in jail and a $500 fine. And then it gets, if it happens again, then it go to 48 hours in jail and a $1,000 or $1,500 fine. And then if it's 3 times, if you can even imagine, if it's a third time, then 72 hours in jail and I believe a $2,500 fine.
So most of the young men are being raised by single moms.
Absolutely.
The man is not in the house. Who is supposed to be in charge of these boys?
Yeah.
And then to come up with an ordinance that says that we're going to lock you up. Right. But yet, if the parent takes the disciplinary steps to discipline their child, the parent can be locked up for disciplining their child.
They'd be over there. Yeah.
They'd be over there.
Yeah.
So we're creating situations that are going to continue to destroy the African-American community. Lose-lose situation. And this council person can't see his way through that?
Well, you know what happened? I went to the ad hoc committee meeting where it was discussed, and it was quickly, I don't want to say pushed down, but the momentum was sucked out of the, I noticed all the headlines had already been issued, but the momentum was sucked out by other council members that started to bring up the practical issues that you've begun talking about now. And so now it's kind of been tabled, and there's a request to get more inputs from more stakeholders, and I guess they're going to have another meeting about it next week.
Yeah, I think they will have another meeting because I can see a situation where my nephew that's being raised by my grandmother.
Correct.
And my nephew has committed a crime.
Right.
And my mother is now in jail.
Yeah.
That's not going to go over very well with me, Chris.
And what about the other kids that may be in the house? Who's watching them?
Right.
What about if she loses her job because she's out,
right.
sitting in jail? How's she bringing money into the household?
Right. We got to have leadership that are wise beyond their years, and that leadership that really studies things, and leadership that looks at the economic tool as their number one priority to elevate their constituents and the members of the city that sent you down there in the first place. This is the news break. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi, and the home of the Deep South. Many of us believe that the South will rise again, but it cannot rise as long as there are knees on black folks' neck. It cannot rise as long as black folk continue to treat one another the way that they're currently doing so. And to Mr. Richards, in closing, I know that you have incurred over $500,000 in expenses during this first month of operation to pick up this garbage. I don't know how long you can go on. I don't know how long you can hold a line just to demonstrate that African Americans can pick up garbage. But I trust that you'll have the strength. I trust that you'll have the financial capacity to hold on. And I trust that this council will change its ways, the error of its ways, and pay this man his $800,000 invoice before you bankrupt him and send another African-American firm out of business, just so that the community can declare, we tried one and look what happened. So no need for any other African-American firm to apply. That's the game. It's been the game for a long time. It's just a game now that's being played by African-American leaders. And we're going to continue to talk about that until we make some inroads. We want everybody out there to have a great day. Until the next time, stay safe.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's good to be in the studio with you today. Many hospitals in the world